Newberg is consistently ranked as one of the safest cities in Oregon, and that's in large part due to the work of the Newberg-Dundee Police Department. But while the police department is publicly funded, the money that comes from taxes isn't enough to supply our police officers with the best training, equipment, and resources available. And that is where the Newberg Police Foundation comes in. The mission of the Newberg-Dundee Police Foundation is to support Newberg-Dundee police officers by promoting excellence within the department and improving public safety for the cities of Newberg and Dundee by providing resources not otherwise readily available from traditional sources. I also want to add that Denise Bacon, our beloved city councilor, Rotarian, and friend who passed away last year, had an instrumental role in founding the Police Foundation, and one of her last requests was for the community to continue investing in the foundation. In this episode, Jim Wheaton, current president of the Newberg-Dundee Police Foundation, shares how the foundation supports the police department and ultimately helps Newberg and Dundee be safer cities to live in. Hi, I'm Daniel Roberts, host of the Givingtown podcast, where we share stories of hope and generosity in Newberg and the surrounding areas. If you're a community leader, a nonprofit, volunteer, or employee, a service club member, or just someone who cares about this community, then this podcast is for you. We live in an amazing community full of incredible people who are working to make Newberg an even better place to live. And this podcast is all about sharing those stories and helping people in our town be inspired, get involved, and have hope for our future. If you're interested in learning more about Newberg, you can also check out our Living in Newberg channel, where we go into all aspects of what it's like living in Newberg. And this podcast is brought to you by my real estate team, the Joyful Roberts Group. It's part of our mission to serve this community, not only by providing amazing service to our clients, but also to help Newberg be an even better place to live in. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home anywhere around Newberg and want an amazing team to help you through that process, reach out to us and we would be happy to serve you. Well, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoy this episode as I talk with Jim Wheaton about the Newberg-Dundee Police Foundation. All right, well, Jim, thanks for joining me today. I'm looking forward to talking with you about the Newberg-Dundee Police Foundation. It's a pleasure having you here.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel.
So for people who don't know you and also who don't know what the Police Foundation is, would you mind just sharing a brief history of what the Newberg-Dundee Police Foundation is, and then kind of your involvement with that as well?
Sure. Back in 2017, a friend of mine, Denise Bacon, got a hold of me, and she knew that I had been into philanthropic initiatives in the city of Newberg. Of course, Newberg is pretty well known for that sort of thing, and the volunteer circuit. But she got a hold of me and knew my interest in law enforcement, and really wanted to see if I was interested in joining with her to produce or create this a nonprofit that is around supporting the police department.
Okay. Yeah, what is your background? Because you actually have quite a bit of a background in kind of criminology and in the police force yourself, right?
I do. Yeah. Yeah. I actually started back in 2004 as a jail deputy in Washington County. So I've worked up in Washington County for my whole career, just up over the hill. And I worked in patrol, have been a detective. I was a sergeant, lieutenant, and now I'm in command of our training center.
Okay. And so you mentioned Denise Bacon, who many people in our community know. She was a well-respected member. And originally, back when I had interviewed her the first time, I wanted to interview her about the Police Foundation. And unfortunately, she passed away. So it's kind of poignant in some ways for me to be here, getting to talk about the Police Foundation again, and now with you as the current president. And yeah, so it's interesting because we've been through quite a bit in the past few years, which, you have seen a lot, and you've probably been very close to, as far as the police, just kind of police in our whole country have really been vilified in a lot of ways, and have really been, it's kind of been a rough go. And sure, there's been mistakes too, but a lot of those those mistakes have been brought into the spotlight. But yeah, so Denise is not here to join us, obviously, but can you share a little bit from your understanding of kind of her passion of getting this started and how that came to be as you understand it?
Sure. Denise was a real pillar of our community. Of course, she helped in so many different ways on numerous councils, all the animals that she helped, among many, many other things. And so I think for her, giving back to the police department was really a passion for her. There was something in her that drove her to that, and it was just so special. And it was great to see that at work. And in the early stages of the foundation, she really did carry the foundation, and she did wore a lot of hats as multiple officer positions, and by officer I mean board officer, but she would do a lot of the work. And so those of us on the board on the initial years really didn't even know all that she was doing. There was so much that she was so well connected, and really was able to spend all of that time building those relationships and finding the funding and all of that. So it was just a real treat to watch her, and learn from her in that way.
Yeah. Now, on a very practical level, what is a police foundation? Because I think a lot of people, myself included, didn't really even know that was a thing. So what are the kind of practical things that a police foundation does for the local law enforcement?
Yeah, so a police foundation, essentially, well, to understand police foundations, you kind of have to understand public funding to kind of get an understanding of it. So, as a taxpayer, we pay our taxes essentially, and again, this is a gross oversimplification, but essentially it goes into this big bucket of money, and then that money is distributed to the county or cities, and then divvied up among the departments. So the police department will get a bucket of money essentially that they can use. And it's a finite amount of money that they have to use for personnel, costs, equipment, training, all of those things. So what the foundation does is we find the very edges of that funding, and where that funding stops, we try to give a bump out to be able to basically supplement that funding to produce more, a higher level of training or equipment or things like that are needed for the police department to be able to fulfill their mission.
Okay. What are some examples that we've seen in Newberg?
Yeah. So for us, we've really focused the last few years, especially with COVID and all of the difficulties and the struggles that have gone on. We've been really focusing on officer wellness. So we have funded a lot of the wellness initiatives, like not gym memberships, but helping build their in-personal gym and wellness spaces to where at the end of a difficult shift, they have a place where they can go and unwind and get themselves healthy. So that's another. We've funded an indoor drone that was recently purchased. So any kind of funding like that, we do a lot of reserve equipment and that sort of thing.
Did you guys help? I know they had what was it, where everyone got together in Memorial Park, and it was kind of a collaborative effort. I think it was Police Night Out. Do you remember?
Yeah, National Night Out.
National Night Out. Yeah.
Yep. We were there. We had a booth, and a couple of our board members were there helping pass out things in support of our mission. Absolutely. We try to get to as many of those public events as we can. And of course, Newberg, there's a bunch to do. So it's been it's a great opportunity to be able to do that.
So that was set up by the police department, not the foundation. That's
correct.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And National Night Out is part of a national, much bigger initiative. So it's all police departments, sheriff's offices across the United States. And so they sort of house, it just provides a connection point between the community and the police officers.
Yeah, because you mentioned the importance of wellness of police officers. And I think many people take for granted really the burden and the stress, and I guess just the pressure that police officers face on a daily basis. And not only from the physical threats, but also, knowing that if they ever do one mistake, that it could cost them their career. They could end up in prison, lawsuits. I mean, the whole range. Can you speak to that a little bit? I mean, you have firsthand experience of knowing what it's like to face that pressure, but also from the foundation side.
Yeah, Daniel, that's a big question. It is exponentially more difficult to be a police officer now than it ever has. I think certainly from when I first started, but for a lot of reasons, and I think a lot of it is due to the gap in understanding between what police officers do on the street and what the public thinks they do or should do or whatnot. And there seems to be an increasing gap with education in police officers. For example, we teach our cops that we can do certain things, but we don't tell the public, well, this is why, or we, or we do tell them and the message just doesn't get passed through, or lots of different reasons. Very complex, obviously, with the communication with the public. But the beauty of that, of foundations like this, is we can provide that connection point to be able to explain to the, be out there with the community as community members. When I'm in my position on the board of directors, I'm not a cop. I'm not a police officer. I'm a community member. And so I go home and I live like everyone else does, so I've had to call the police. And so it was nice for me to be able to give back in that way and really help tell that story and help shepherd some of those initiatives and increase that communication between the public and get those touch points in Newberg specifically for us, and because there are so many opportunities to be able to do that. Yeah.
I think that's it's easy to forget, at least for some people, I think it's easy to forget that police officers are real people. And I think the motto, if I remember right, is supporting those who support us. I don't know if I got that right.
And that's it in a nutshell. Essentially, we support our foundation supports the police department's mission. So we basically exist to help the police department fulfill their mission. And if you look at their mission, of course, I have to pull it up to have it offhand. But it's all, every element of that mission is tied to the community, and so it's really a great place to be able to do those, to make those connections with the community. And it's an easy place to pull a bunch of people who are interested in giving back to the community. And so it's been just an absolute blessing.
Yeah. What are some misconceptions you feel like people have about police officers in general?
That's really tough, and it really depends on a person's background, where they're coming from, what part of the community that they're from, and how close they are. If you have a friend who's a police officer, maybe you get a different take on law enforcement. And if your only connection was, if you were arrested, for example, and let's say that interaction didn't go well, that could taint your, view of law enforcement as a whole. So, not to mention media and all of those other things that are out there. And so, I would encourage people to go out and meet the police officers and walk into the police station and really just, look at them, like you said, talking about being normal people, and learn and grow together and try to, build that connection.
Yeah. What are some other ways that the police department works to engage the community? Because it's much more than just, you did something wrong and trying to, get their quotas. People always have all these things they say.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it is much more than that. It's really, again, tying the mission to the community and getting out there, meeting the people, as an officer or a deputy, getting out and talking to kids riding their bikes or down at the park and playing basketball with them, that sort of thing. And that happens here in our community. That's one thing that is very clear to me, being a part of this board and this law enforcement community locally, is that is at the forefront of everybody, that community connection and the education and the partnerships.
Yeah. So as far as the foundation, what kind of things do you think you've made possible? I mean, like you said, there's the getting the gym and the training and the wellness, but kind of on a more broad level, like how has the foundation existing really positively benefited not just the police officers themselves, but the whole community?
Yeah, I would say, there's a lot of, with any philanthropic group, there's going to be vicarious help or connections. And so by creating an environment where a police officer can feel mentally well, physically well, and taken care of and supported, well, then when they go out to handle, our 911 calls or, helping push someone off the road that's broke down or whatever, they can do so with a clear head and a compassionate heart. And they're, anything that we can do is going to be beneficial in that way.
Yeah. So what do you think Newberg would look like without a police foundation?
I think a lot of it is, again, it's funding essentially is what we help provide. And so without the foundation money, that some of the funds would have to come from somewhere. So for example, the reserve unit or section is all, and by reserve, I mean reserve police officers are volunteer people who put on a badge and go out and do police work essentially for little to no pay. And they're essentially volunteers. And their equipment costs money. There is training that costs money. There's all kinds of financial aspects of that. And the foundation can act as a vehicle to help with some of that funding and direct funding in certain ways and be able to make sure that they have what they need to go out there and do that. So without the foundation, some of that funding might not exist. Also, just like I talked about before, the extra sort of training, or not training, but equipment pieces like drones, for example, that's something that it's really hard to find money for that kind of thing. So if we're able to go out and get money from the community, and they say, yeah, we want our officers to have the best of equipment, and we're able to facilitate that. So it really is just giving back to themselves. So if they have a dangerous situation in their home or their neighborhood where they need a drone, for example, well, they just paid for their own safety, essentially. No, so it's a pretty dang good investment. You know?
Well, I think wasn't there a situation recently where I think in our neighborhood, there was a driver who essentially did a hit and run, and they used the drone to kind of go up and find the cars so they could locate it because they were trying to hide somewhere.
There are a lot of ways. Yeah. The use of drones, of course, there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just, I think when a lot of people think of drones, they think of some, sitting up high and kind of, surveilling the whole community or whatever. But these are very targeted, tactical deployments, and the officers that are using those are specialized training, and they learn how and when to use those. But there are definitely rules through the FAA, and they all have to get specialized licenses and those kinds of things.
Yeah. So with your position, how long have you been on the board?
I joined in 2017. So yeah, it's going on 7 years now.
Yeah. What is the thing that has made you most excited, or that's made you most passionate about being on the board?
I think for me, it's when I see a Newberg-Dundee police officer driving by and I know that I've done my part in helping keep them safe, which ultimately helps keep me and my family safe. And I think that's a really, for me, that's just a great feeling, and knowing that we can give back in that way.
Yeah. Are there any future projects or goals that the foundation has looking forward?
Yeah, we're really in an interesting spot right now. So I'm actually passing the baton to the new president, and she is going to be taking it over. And we have some new board officers, so we're really just in this phase of taking a look at the policies. We're taking a look at the bylaws, seeing if there's anything that we can tidy up and make stronger and build that resilience in the team and move forward into the next generations. And with that comes kind of really planning for the new vision. Coming out of COVID, half of my tenure on the board was basically in COVID. And so we didn't, there wasn't a whole lot to do. We met, but we couldn't really, it was just, everybody was just anxiously waiting to be able to help. And so as we're coming out of that, the new board will really be, it's exciting to think about what the future will bring.
Do you have any ideas of what that could look like?
I would anticipate some increased funding. I think we're going to be able to increase the technology of the police department. I think certainly going down the same road with employee wellness, officer wellness, kind of helping with some of those initiatives, physical, there's a bunch of different things out there that we can help in that way. I think just increasing all of those things is well into the future is going to be helpful for not only the board, but the police department as a whole.
Yeah. What are ways that the community can get involved or support?
Yeah, we have a website. It's oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to look it up here just so I don't mess it up, because
I think I was just looking at it a minute ago.
Yeah, it's Newberg-Dundee Police Foundation.org. So Newberg-Dundee Police Foundation.org. And if you click on that website, there's a big button there that says donate, but also, it's not just about money, it's about time. All these things take a significant amount of effort. All the events, all of those things, we need volunteers to help with committees and even if just to provide insight from the community standpoint of what we could do better, how we could direct funding, anything like that. Happy to listen to any of that.
Do you have like major events that you do every year to get funding?
Well, we had really one big event was our stakeout, which was several years ago. And it was a steak dinner and an auction. But that was right before the pandemic hit. And so we've really been in this lull and haven't had a lot of that. So most of it's been just from private donors at this point. But now we do anticipate getting into more events as most certainly as the spring and summer unfold.
Yeah, I think the whole nonprofit industry really has been really hammered by COVID, trying to figure out, okay, if you had something that was really difficult to do and get people together, how do you then come back? And especially as a board, because for example, I'm in Rotary and you have an entire club who's helping with that stuff. But when it's just a board and there's not paid positions, it can be quite the challenge to
absolutely
get stuff done.
It really is. And thankfully, I tell you, the board, we have a solid group of people and their hearts are just unbelievable. And their amount of time and effort that they give into the board it's been truly extraordinary and an absolute blessing to be a part of.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier was your son being on the board, which is kind of a special and unique thing. Can you share a little bit about that?
It sure is. Yeah. I guess it was this last year, as a board, we decided we wanted to introduce a young person into our board. So we've done this in our city with lots of other things, with like the community safety boards and city council has done some of that. And so we decided to jump on board with that. And my son was interested. And so he submitted his, application or whatever. And of course I had to step out of the room to the vote, but the board voted him in as a member, and it's just been really, really neat to have that connection with him too. And he and I are able to something that we can bond over. Plus, it's just a great thing for our community. Really gets him, that foundational element before he goes off to college and start his life. That how important it is to give back to your community and make that a part of your overall human wellness.
Yeah. Well, we got through most of the questions, and if you're all right, I'm curious to learn a little bit about your perspective in criminology and kind of criminal justice. And I mean, that was your degree, right?
Yes.
So, where we are in a society, there's the police side, there's a police foundation and the enforcement, but also like where we are as a society in terms of just like helping each other be the best that we can be. And obviously the criminal justice system is required because there is always going to be people that break the law. But when you look at some of the issues that we're facing that are much bigger than, we just need more police to crack down. It's like, well, what's the core issue here? For example, I'm a volunteer at Love Inc. And in my volunteering there, I saw a young man he's been homeless since he was 14. And, he's trying to make his way through and he's trying to do the best that he can. And I think he really is. Yet, like, what's going on in someone's life for the parents not to be able to take care of them, for them to be on the streets at 14. And a lot of people will turn to drugs or, theft and just kind of go down into that pattern. So I'm curious your perspective on that, because you focus on the criminal side, but there's also the society side of that too, right?
Absolutely. Well, I tell you, Daniel, that is a big question, big topic, and there's nothing we're going to be able to solve in this, but I will tell you this. I think it really starts with relationships. And, they have a saying at the State Sheriff's Association about relationships being primary. And that doesn't just mean relationships among police officers. That means relationships among all humans. And I think understanding, finding that understanding between all walks of life, everybody in every job, and coming together as humans and learning from one another, I think is a really good first step. And I think we have a lot to learn there, and we have a long way to go in that realm. Yeah.
There's got to be more to it than
there is. Yeah.
We've got a few minutes to chat. Yeah. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. I would say, it really, you'd have to break down each one of those issues on their own, although they are infinitely complex and connected in some way. So you take houselessness, for example. Well, it's easy for any of us to say, oh, well, this person is houseless because of this reason. Well, that might be our experience, but who knows from their experience, right? So there's these different points in view of each component. And then how does that interact with the criminal justice system? Are they in a place where they can't be legally? And then, do we send a police officer out there to deal with that? And if so, how much force are we going to use to do that? There's this constant juggling of governmental interest. And that's with all of those issues, the drug use and things like that. There are varying levels of criminality at play and varying levels of authority for police to do certain things. And so, at the same time, there's almost this parallel universe going on of legal discourse and sort of like political movements and initiatives that change that sometimes daily. And so it's difficult to keep up on a lot of that. So the interesting part about it is there's no right, there's no wrong. There's just the humanity and trying to learn and grow through that it's difficult. It's complex. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned like a person who is on the streets. Maybe they're experiencing mental illness. Maybe they're experiencing, they're on drugs, whatever the situation might be. It's interesting that the police officers often are the first responders. And back in 2020, and I think thankfully it's died down for the most part now, the whole defund the police movement, thinking, oh, well, we need to have these other, mental health professionals out there. But it's like, I just imagine someone in a clinical psychologist goes out to someone who's dealing with mental illness. Oh, well, bummer, they actually have a gun and now you have no training to deal with that. So now our, mental illness professional has now been killed on the streets by, it's interesting. Like it is. But then on the other side, police officers are expected to deal with so much and so many unknowns in any given situation. It could be, a nearly infinite options of what this person could be dealing with, what situation you're walking into. You have no idea if this person is violent and could pull out a gun and kill you, or if they're just, having a hard day. And I imagine the police
are having a good day.
Or they're having a good
day. You don't know what you're coming into. Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the great things. And I'm curious if the Police Foundation has been able to provide training on that front of helping people, deal with those kind of things.
Absolutely. That's part of that's part of the whole package of us trying to essentially move the police department in toward their vision. So the chief and his executive team getting together saying, okay, this is the problem in Newberg right now. And how do we go about solving that? So, it's easy to get kind of pulled into national topics and discussions and things like that. And just from my experience, police work is done very differently depending on where you live or work geographically in the United States. And so I even do the same thing where I think, oh, well, over there, and wherever this incident happened. Well, it's in some cases apples to oranges, in terms of like levels of training and or types of training or the laws that are in those areas. So bringing it to us, that's the difficult challenge, is trying to figure out, based on what our laws are here locally, how do we work within that framework and build those connections and educate each other on all sides to really to make our communities stronger, and that connection between the police is stronger. Because I think it's really important to understand that police aren't the them in this situation; they're the us, right? We are all. I mean, I'm a police officer and I'm a lieutenant, but I am also a neighbor and a husband and a brother and an uncle, and so, I go grocery shopping, and so all of our officers out in the street, the people that we're out there to support, and I think it's important to understand that, and also just, it helps strengthen that bond, I think, to get that connection. But if we don't get close, we don't have those touch points, like any other relationship, it can become severed or broken or cracked. And then that forces some repair that needs to be done.
Yeah. I appreciate that perspective. And I appreciate the perspective that our police department has. And Newberg, I believe, is the 4th safest city in Oregon. I think I recently was doing some research on that. And
I could see that.
Either way, we're close. And sure, we've got our own issues, but I appreciate the perspective and the approach that the police department has, and it's been very, it very much is, like you're saying, coming alongside and supporting, and not, I think a lot of people just have the wrong impression. Now, if you're driving 80 miles an hour in a 50 mile an hour zone, you're probably going to get a ticket, and you may have a negative perspective because someone caught you doing something you shouldn't. But at the same time, I think there really is the perspective of, like, we want to make this community better. And I think that comes across clear. And I think, the misconceptions about, the police get paid on commission, like they can, which just isn't true.
I can pull that rumor if that's helpful, because that's definitely not a thing.
As people think, a police officer's got to give me a ticket because he's trying, he's just waiting for someone to make a mistake so he can get his, commission cut from the citation. I'm like, I don't think that's true.
It's certainly not in our jurisdictions over here, but there might be somewhere in America or the world where that's the case, but definitely not here. And I really, you hit on a great point of this accountability piece, right? So nobody wants to get caught with their hand in the cookie jar, right? So it's kind of, you're speeding, you get the ticket. It's this feeling of, it's just this, it's a negative feeling. It's a negative interaction potentially. And sometimes it is a positive interaction, but, ultimately if you're getting a ticket, there's a financial loss there. And so the deck ends up being stacked against the police officers, because it's not like they're charged with the duty. We told them as the people, neighbor, I want you to go out there and I want you to make sure that people aren't speeding through our neighborhood. And then they go do the thing and write the tickets and do what we ask them to do. And there's this sort of equal and opposite negative reaction sometimes. And so that's why training is so critical in how to interact in those traffic stops or whatever it is. Because some of these places, you hit on it earlier, or some of these incidents where a traffic stop, for example, can be a very, very dangerous thing. It's one of the most dangerous things a police officer can do. And so as a community member, you're driving along and you're heading to the bakery to get a roll to, come home for dinner. And you get stopped by a police officer or a deputy, and they're acting in a way that, you know who you are, but they don't know who you are. And so they're coming up very cautiously. They're doing all of the stuff and with pursuant to their training. And there might not be an understanding about why those things are happening. And the reality is, because there's been studies done, they're trained to respond to dangerous situations, because it might not be the person heading to the bakery. It might be a person from, who has a warrant for their arrest out of California, and they've got 2 strikes, and they know that they're going to prison for the rest of their life and miss their, family's events or whatever. And so, and they'll do whatever it takes to get, it's just an example. There's lots of reasons for that. But I think, that again, it just really comes back to that understanding. And that's why we're there, is to help bridge that and be out there with the community alongside our police officers that are just doing absolute bravery every day and night while we're all sleeping. They're out there doing their thing. And so I'm so happy and proud for the time that I've been on the board and being able to give back to our community in that way.
What do you think is the one message you'd want to give to the Newberg community about our police department?
Well, I think, let me grab my phone here so I can read it verbatim bit here. But if you look at the mission statement of the Newberg-Dundee Police Department, and I'll just read a couple of highlights, to promote individual responsibility is the first component. So it's really, again, that's tied to community. That's us. They're talking about us as community members. Work in partnership with communities to reduce crime. Again, partnership. That's a theme. Fear of crime. The police don't have fear of crime. It's us as community members. So again, they're tying it back to us, the people, and enhance the livability. Again, livability, they're talking about us. And so every element of that mission statement is tied directly to us as a community. And so that's why us as the community building this foundation to be able to give back to the people that are protecting us is so critical.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time and your time on the board and helping fund our police officers, our department, and help them do their job better. Last question I have for you is that I like asking everyone who comes on, just given your position in the community and on the board, what gives you hope for the future of Newberg?
I think seeing people walk and run and get active and get engaged and really podcasts like this, people who are listening to this podcast, seeking out ways that they can improve the community. Newberg is a place with infinite possibilities when it comes to philanthropic initiatives, helping out, or just getting to know people. And I love that about this community. And I think if I had one thing to say that I'm thankful for, it would be that. It was just the active engagement and positivity that's radiating through our community.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and look forward to getting this message out to our community.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you for tuning in to the Givingtown podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend who you think might benefit from hearing it. While more and more people are continuing to hear about this podcast, I still need your help to spread the message about all the people and organizations that make Newberg so great. Well, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next episode.